You're listening to Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library podcast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library podcast. We're a team of library workers who dish about their latest reads, views, and passions alongside fascinating conversations with local luminaries. I'm your host, Tayla, the branch librarian at the Oaklawn Branch Library in Cranston, and my pronouns are she, her. Let's dive in and discover who our guests are today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cheryl Patnaude. I am a retired social worker, having worked in the field of interpersonal violence for 44 years. My areas of expertise are interpersonal violence, including domestic violence, child abuse, and elder abuse. And most recently, the job I retired from was from St. Elizabeth Haven for elder justice, which we'll talk about today. And I was the elder justice advocate. I also teach adjunct at CCRI and do a host of other activities and have lots of involvement in so many issues that I'm passionate about. My pronouns are she, her. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Hi, I'm Jeanne Gattegno. It's really nice to be here this afternoon. My title is Program Director. I'm the Program Director of the Haven for Elder Justice, which is a component of the St. Elizabeth community here in Rhode Island. Our focus is elder abuse. And I've been in the social service business for more than 50 years. And so this has been a new experience for me, learning about elder abuse and getting involved. So I'm really happy to be able to talk about it today. And my pronouns are she and her.
All right. Thank you for joining us today. So a little bit later in the show, we will talk about the Rhode Island Coalition for Elder Justice and the work that you all have been doing as part of that organization to raise awareness about elder abuse and help people get help. But before we jump into that, let's start off as we always do with what have you been reading?
I can start. So one of the things I found during my career, and actually when I retired last December, was that what I tended to read and what I tended to watch in terms of movies were actually documentaries, and they tended to be about the areas in which I worked. So they tended to be about interpersonal violence. They tended to be sort of dark, if you will. So I made a conscientious decision to stop watching the news. I made a conscientious decision to stop reading books about heavy, sort of dark issues. And so I went to the light. I went to the other side. And I have been reading a lot of Ellen Hildebrand. I always thought that she was kind of just a writer of books about love stories, which, didn't interest me that much. But then I read one of her books and discovered that they're mystery, but there's also a little, family issue going on, but there's also a little love story involved. So I have been reading her books nonstop till like 2 a.m. And the most recent book I read, which I just finished this past week, was Swan Song, which is actually her last book. So she says. And so I'm really enjoying her books. And I also tend to read books about dogs because I have a rescue dog that I'm madly in love with. And so I read a lot of books that have happy endings. I've gone from books that are, heavy and sort of represent the work that I did to trying to just lighten my head up a little bit and, just read and get involved in literature that doesn't so much have to do with my work, but just kind of brings me joy.
Yeah, we all need that break,
Absolutely.
Unlike Cheryl, I don't spend my time reading books about the work that I do. I've spent a long time working in the field, and it's really heavy duty work when you're working with families and individuals. And so that I tend to go off to another country in my reading I've spent some time reading Patrick Taylor, uh, who writes a series about the Irish country. I'm an Irish person, so I find a great deal of pleasure reading about 100 years ago in Ireland and how people lived. I also have a real interest in the whole World War II and Holocaust because I work with people and I've seen the problems, and I've spent a lifetime with people like Cheryl trying to help people. It's hard for me to understand how the Holocaust happened and how the world allowed that to happen. So I tend to read a little bit about that as well. And the book that I enjoyed the most, even though it was very difficult, was Sarah's Key. Is written by Tatiana D. Rosenay. And I'm reading one of her other books right now, The Rain Watcher. Both of the stories are developed in Paris, but Sarah's Key is specifically around the Holocaust and the survival of a young woman in those days. So those are my tendencies are to go to read across the ocean in a distant land, both heritage-wise and then, of course, the whole issue of how did it happen.
Yeah, well, reading can be a great way to experience these places that, for whatever reason, you maybe can't go to or can't go to right now. That's great. Um, in a real kind of departure in tone from both of your recommendations, I have recently been reading a series of graphic novels that are based on and kind of continuing the story of a video game I played called Life is Strange. It's a very like story driven game, which is what I liked about it. I sometimes struggle with certain video games that are just like collect all the berries, you know what like it's like it gets very repetitive for me, but this was kind of like more of like a visual novel or like a movie where there were certain choices to affect the story. So it's about this girl Max, and she discovers one day that she can reverse time in somewhat short bursts. The longer she tries to go back in time, the more difficult it is, and it ends up being somewhat dangerous. The story is kind of her figuring out these powers and coming to terms with like, why was I chosen for this? And like, can I do something good with this? She keeps having these visions that the town that she lives in is going to be destroyed by a huge storm. And so she's like, are these powers meant for me to try to stop this from happening? And she's discovering that there's possibly some other people who also have kind of like interesting powers, are able to affect reality in interesting ways. And so it's been really great to be able to go back into that story, because they made some sequels to the games, but the sequels have all been like brand new stories with new characters. So it's nice to be able to visit Max and her best friend Chloe again and revisit those characters and kind of find out, okay, what happens after like this big cataclysmic ending to the game. So that's been very fun. So besides reading, have either of you been watching anything interesting lately?
So I do not watch any television at all. It's just never been something I'm interested in. But I think of the arts and literature, what I enjoy the most is theater. So I am fan of the shows that the Providence Performing Arts Center, PPAC, puts on. I tend to go, I'll see a show that's coming up, and I'm like sitting waiting for the tickets to be released. And I actually indulge myself in buying like the best ticket that I can, not because I have lots of money, but because I feel like that's a way to treat myself. And I find that being upfront really makes me feel like I'm involved and I don't have any distractions. So I've seen lots and lots of shows at PPAC, all amazing. And actually, tonight I'm going to PPAC to see Beautiful Noise, which is the story of Neil Diamond, who, for me, growing up, was one of my favorite singers and still is one of my favorite singers. I've had the opportunity to see him in concert many, many times. I've actually already seen Beautiful Noise in Boston, but when I saw that it was coming to Providence, I felt like I left that show in Boston feeling so joyful and feeling like, wow, I could just sit and have it start all over again and just watch it a second time. So when I saw that it was coming to Providence, I jumped on it. And so I'm going tonight and I'm super excited. And then I also bought tickets to Mamma Mia, which is another favorite play of mine, which again, super upbeat, lots of fun music. I've seen it already. Again, I saw it already. But it's the kind of show where people dance in the aisles and just sing their hearts out. And so that brings me a lot of joy and just like a nice escape. I tend to be a joyful person anyway, but to be part of a huge crowd and everyone's just having fun and they're in the moment is something that I really try to involve myself in. So I'm doing that tonight, and then I have Mamma Mia to look forward to. Sometimes I go by myself if nobody else is interested in going. So tonight I'm going by myself, but that's fine because I'll be singing and dancing and hooting and hollering along with the rest of the crowd.
And believe me, she will.
I will.
You talking about kind of being part of something collective as part of the theater experience made me think of a story which I think I told on our previous show, but new show means I get to tell all my stories again.
Sure.
So I went to go see Hamilton at PPAC, and that was the first time we had gone back to the theater since COVID.
Oh.
We had been really cautious during the pandemic because I have asthma, so that makes me somewhat more high risk. So when Hamilton was coming, I was like, we have to do it. So we went back, and it already is a very emotionally moving, amazingly done show. But at the end of the show, literally, like the whole audience stood up for a standing ovation. And I had never been in that experience before of like I've been where big chunks of the audience are rising for standing up, but like this was the first time I'd been where everywhere I look, everyone is standing up and they're clapping and cheering and they're so overjoyed. And I was so moved by that emotionally. Like I started crying because I was just like, we're all just so happy to be here. that was like really an amazing memory, an amazing experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think for me, doing the work that I've done throughout my career, when I have experiences like you're talking about, it just restores my faith in humanity. To be able to look around and see, like you said, everybody's on their feet, everybody's clapping, everybody's expressing emotion, and for me, it just, as I said, it restores my faith in humanity.
Yeah, that we can have moments where we're all collectively being good and kind to each other.
Exactly.
Yes. My favorite performances have been the Phantom of the Opera, which I've seen 3 times, and Les Miserables, which I've seen twice. And those are the kinds of performances for me that really bring me to tears, really bring me to my emotional state, which I try never to get to on Cheryl.
Absolutely.
Very reserved. Cheryl is very open and energetic, and I'm very reserved kind of person. So in terms of what I watch a lot of public television, and I even have a subscription to BritBox because I love the mysteries. I love Vera, who's a police woman in Scotland, and I love Midsummer Murders and other ones I can't even remember now. But what I like most about watching those kinds of mysteries is that there isn't the violence. that you see here in America. You can have a murder go on, in these performances, but you don't see the goriness of it all. You don't see the brutality. So I enjoy watching mysteries, and some of them are from Australia, some of them are English, some of them are Irish and Scottish. So I get to see the whole other side of the world while I'm watching programs that I enjoy. But as I said, I'm the reserved one. Cheryl and I have worked together for quite a while, and our roles in our jobs. I was the administrator and Cheryl was the social worker. So I've always described our team as Cheryl does people, I do paper.
It's true.
But you need both kinds of people to make the world go round.
Absolutely. And we just bounce off of one another.
So it's not glamorous, but someone's got to do it.
Right.
The paperwork, I mean.
Oh, God.
All right. So I want us to have enough time to talk about the Rhode Island Coalition for Elder Justice. So for folks who have not heard about this organization, can you talk a little bit about what you do and what you're all about?
Well, and maybe just to start with a little bit of history, the St. Elizabeth community started a shelter for abused elders in 2009. And over time, it evolved into a full range victim service program for elder victims. And Cheryl was instrumental in really expanding and carrying that program out. As part of the work that we were doing, we were building relationships with other providers, other services, police, the Attorney General's office, and everyone that we talked to acknowledged the importance and the extent of the problem, not just in Rhode Island, but nationally, and that we're all plugging away, helping elders. But more work than that needed to be done. We needed to spend the time thinking about how to work together, how to share the resources we have, how to form a team, how to really approach a victim's situation in a full range and not just a hit or miss or sporadically. Because in that work, in our work, no one can solve a problem. It takes a lot of people to work with one victim. So around 2018, St. Elizabeth Haven, the St. Elizabeth community, we received a federal grant to do training and to develop services. And part of that grant required us to develop what they call a community response. What that did was it allowed us to have the resources, the financial and the human resource, to really take that idea of bringing people together to work on the issue of elder abuse and to really create a formal operation, a formal group. So that's how it started. And it really happened because with that federal grant, we developed a team of trainers to do the education part. And those trainers were representative of the Attorney General's office, police, elder advocates, and also the Office of Healthy Aging, the Adult Protective Service Unit. And we were all trained to do training. But as we began to look at the issue of elder abuse, it was that team who went out and brought other people to the table. And it naturally became a group, a coalition of a variety of people. So here we are a few years later, really working very well to grow the coalition.
I think one of the things that's really impressive about the coalition, first of all, for Jeanne and I, we've been at it from the very beginning. And so we're always so impressed when we have our monthly meetings at how many people have joined the coalition and have been with us from the beginning. And our membership is not only large in terms of numbers, but more importantly, the diversity of those who belong to the coalition and the disciplines that they represent are so important. We have mental health, we have advocacy, we have, as Jeanne said, the Attorney General's office, we have adult protective services, we have banking represented, we have fire, first responders represented. And so we have so many different disciplines, all of whom at some point will have, involvement in a case of elder abuse. And one of the things certainly that I found as an advocate and that Jeanne alluded to is that you can't do this work alone. So oftentimes what I was able to do in a case of elder abuse, what I was able to do as an advocate, the prosecutor from the Attorney General's office wasn't able to do, but she was able to do something that Adult Protective Services wasn't able to do. And so the whole notion of working as a team and collaborating, Jeanne and I, that's like a favorite word. We say it all the time: collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. We say it when we do trainings all the time. That, first of all, you can't do this work alone because it's hard work. It's really difficult work. And we need one another to build strong cases. If we're looking to try to, bring a case to prosecution, it's not work that any one of us can do individually. We have to work as a team. And so through the coalition, we started, sort of with this idea, with this notion, and then we brought some people on board. And then, over the years, the memberships has just grown exponentially. And we are, in fact, building stronger cases, and we are certainly improving responses to victims of abuse. And that's really one of the key components, because what we know about elder abuse is that it's really a silent epidemic. When I do trainings, I often say, elder abuse is the new child abuse, and child abuse was the new domestic violence. So we've moved and made significant gains in the field of domestic violence and in the field of child abuse. I worked in both fields, and we are making tremendous gains in the field of elder abuse. But elder abuse has really only been on the map, if you will, for X number of years. So it is absolutely a silent epidemic. But what we know is that there are so many disciplines committed to doing the work and to putting it on the map, if you will.
I think that it's important here to say as well that there are several kinds of elder abuse. There's physical, there's sexual, there's domestic violence, there's emotional, psychological, bullying, financial exploitation. We as a society know all of those words, but how many of us can recognize that happening to an older person? It's a silent epidemic because older people, they don't tell anyone what's happening. And those of us who sometimes see elder abuse, we might just say, he's always acted that way, or they're just old and cranky. The importance of what the coalition is doing, in addition to addressing how to work with each other, is providing education. It's important that people be able to recognize the symptoms of elder abuse and then know how to report that to someone so that the victim gets some help. So that's a major component of what the coalition will be doing over the next few years.
So just so I understand, and then therefore so our audience understands better, is the coalition working with and being contacted directly by victims, or are you guys working with care professionals and mental health professionals to to do trainings and raise awareness?
Yeah, the victim service program, that's where a person would call for help. Okay. So that would be the Haven for Elder Justice, or it would be the Adult Protective Service Unit to report the abuse. The coalition's work is not client or individual centered, it's system centered. We want to look at service gaps. We want to look at what we can do better or what we need to do. We want to look at, public policy. What laws do we need to implement in this state? So there's a big difference. You would not call the coalition for victim services.
And one of the important pieces of information for everyone to recognize and understand is that just like for child abuse, there's mandatory reporting in Rhode Island, everyone, regardless of their citizenship status, regardless of their age, everyone in Rhode Island is by state statute a mandated reporter if they have concerns about an elder. You don't have to know for certain that the elder is being abused or neglected. You have to just have a concern. And so everyone is a mandated reporter. And the entity that receives those reports is the Office of Healthy Aging. And what happens is cases are then triaged and assigned to investigators or to case management agencies who then do an individual one-on-one in-person response. So as Jeanne said, the coalition as an entity doesn't actually do client-centered work, but the client-centered work happens through mandated reporting, so through Adult Protective Services, and then the other disciplines might get involved, including the Attorney General's office or law enforcement or the court system, those kinds of things.
So what do you want people listening to know in regards to keeping the older people in their lives safe and to help prevent elder abuse and promote elder justice?
Well, I think in the training, and Cheryl, you do the training, but we talk about ways that we can help. And I think that it's important for us as family members and neighbors and people who go to church with each other that we really listen to an older person, really listen and hear what an older person is saying. I think that there are signs. If you see a change in the way in which an elder's personal care is they're not taking care of themselves, their clothes are soiled, they're not bathing, they're hungry. There are a number of signs that we need to look at. They can't pay their bills. They've been paying their bills their whole life, and suddenly they can't pay their bills. The lights are being turned off, or the mortgage is being threatened because someone's using their money.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important that the general population, all of us, take the time to look, to talk to elders, to let them talk, and then to report if there's something suspicious for the good of the older person. No one wants to be the person who says, oh my God, the neighbor next door, she just died because of abuse, and I thought I saw it and didn't do anything. No one wants to be in that position. If you see something, report it.
Mm-hmm. And I think going back to one of the points Jeanne mentioned, in terms of dismissing concerns that one might have about an elder by saying, well, they're always cranky or they have dementia. That's something that, we toss that word around like every day, like it's just part of our everyday vernacular. And one of the issues in terms of a systems issue that we have to address and we have to really pay attention to is the issue of ageism. Because in our culture, we tend to just dismiss people who are older adults. They become invisible, they become the throwaways. And people don't put credence in what someone who's an older adult might say in terms of a concern that they're expressing. And so, as a culture, we really have to look at the issue of ageism and what that means for people, and that older adults are not invisible. In fact, they're very active and engaged and involved. And in Rhode Island, interestingly enough, an elder by state statute is defined as someone who is 62 and over. 62 is really young if you look at our culture now. 30 years ago, it may not have been perceived as young. But in terms of mandatory reporting, we're mandated to report for persons 62 and over. But we also have to look at the issue of ageism and, older adults being invisible, and therefore we don't pay attention or put credence in concerns they might be raising. And again, as Jeanne said, I would rather be able to sleep at night knowing I called the appropriate agency and shared my concern than to wake up the next morning and, God forbid, something awful has happened and I haven't done anything about it. And so in addition to the coalition, as an entity, we also have committees that are part of the coalition. So we have a public awareness committee whose mission is to raise public awareness, and we do that a number of ways. We have brochures, we have flyers, we've done public service announcements, we've done videos, and so that the mission, if you will, of the Public Service Committee is to raise awareness for the public. Any issue that involves interpersonal violence is always tough for people to talk about and to recognize. So we have our Public Awareness Committee, and all of our committees are consist of people who are on our coalition or people who may be just interested in doing committee work but don't have time to commit to the full coalition. We also have a home care committee where we're looking at the issue of home care services that elders are able to access. And we know right now there's a lack of home care providers because of low pay and not being paid for mileage and so forth. And so, there's a huge service gap. So the home care committee is really taking a hard look at how can we provide in-home services to people who need them so that they can age in place. Nobody wants to go to a nursing home. Everybody wants to age in their own home. And so that's one of the missions of the home care agency. We also have a protocols committee where we're looking at protocols across different disciplines. So right now, one of our main focuses is on working with emergency rooms and emergency departments in hospital settings to recognize elder abuse when they see it, and also to adopt a model of response. Because what we know is that, typically any victim of abuse will make up some type of an excuse, if you will, around how the abuse happened or how the injury happened or why they're not getting the proper nutrition. Victims tend to protect the abuser. So one of the missions of the Protocols Committee is to really work with the first responders, especially emergency rooms, to help them develop protocols and a response that's across the board when an elder comes in and there are concerns that one might have about that elder. We also have a guardianship committee. Guardianship in Rhode Island is a real challenge. We have 39 cities and towns, and every city and town has a different approach legally to guardianship. And so it's established through probate court, but every probate court in Rhode Island operates differently. And that's just boggles your mind that there's not a uniform response. And guardianship it's a very serious responsibility if one becomes a guardian of an elder or a person perhaps with mental health concerns, because what it does is basically strip that person of their civil liberties. And so we don't have a lot of oversight over people who are guardians. So one of the challenges we're trying to look at and address and establish consistency in is how one obtains guardianship and not make it as unwieldy a process as it is right now. We have a personnel committee that looks at, issues around staff and that kind of thing. And basically, we look at, internally who we might be interviewing for positions and, hiring committees. And then that's brought to the full membership. And we also have a nominating committee where if we have a position open in terms of employment, or if we run across somebody in perhaps our trainings who says, gee, I'd like to become a part of the coalition. I'd like to join a committee. Our nominating committee reaches out to that person, gets information about the person, and then again brings that to the full committee. And everything we do is dictated through our bylaws and through our voting mechanisms and so forth. So as an entity, the coalition is quite large, but what we also have the luxury of doing is taking all of the valuable members of the coalition and having them become a part of a committee so that we can move ahead in so many different directions with our mission.
So, is there anything else that you want our audience to know about the coalition or about the issue of elder abuse in general before we wrap up?
Well, I think, we're really proud of the work that the coalition has achieved. It has spent a lot of time thinking about what it is, what it wants to do, and how. And this is the year that the coalition will become its own entity. Right now, it comes under the umbrella of the St. Elizabeth community, but it will be going off and create its 501c3 self-standing organization. So we're very excited about that. A lot of time is going into the planning for that. So we're working hard, and the momentum keeps growing. The people who were at the table in 2018, 2019 are still there today, working hard to create and to improve and to redefine the work that we do and the needs that we're responding to. So it's very exciting work.
It is. And something else your listeners might be interested in, Tayla, is that we received a federal grant to do training. The curriculum is called Abuse in Later Life. And so we do kind of an Elder Abuse 101 training, which provides the basic information, including mandatory reporting. And our training is geared toward different populations. So, we go and we provide an educational session for perhaps people who are living in high-rise apartment settings, people who are living in the community. We do law enforcement trainings. We do training for mental health. We do trainings for pretty much any entity or any organization that is interested in learning more about elder abuse, and not just learning more about it, but what do I need to do about it? And so if anyone is interested in training, you can feel free to call our agency. Our main number is 739-2844, and just tell the person who answers that you're interested in training, and she'll put you through to the training coordinator. So we really, although we're very small, we do a lot. We do a lot, and we're always happy to serve as a resource to anybody who has questions or, maybe wants to bounce something off of someone. We're happy to serve as a resource because, again, the bottom line is none of us can or should be doing this work alone. We need to work with one another collaboratively.
Fantastic. Also, is there a website that people can go to find out more information? We'll also include a link in the show notes.
Yeah, so we have a website. We have videos on YouTube. We have Facebook. We have a communications specialist who just does a fabulous job and is really working hard to make our online presence more robust. So there's contact names, phone numbers, there's information about elder abuse, about trainings, it's just a great resource. So if you just Google Rhode Island Coalition for Elder Justice, you'll find us.
Fantastic. So we wrap up the show with the segment we call The Last Chapter, where we talk about a library or bookish related question. So I thought I would ask you both, what books are in your to be read pile? What are you excited to jump into?
So I've had this book on my bookcase forever, but I'm going to start probably tomorrow. It's called The Other, Wes Moore. So people are probably familiar with Wes Moore, who was, now a very high profile politician who spoke at the Democratic National Convention. But he wrote a book quite a long time ago before he became such a public person. It's a true story. So it turns out that he grew up in a very poor socioeconomic neighborhood, I believe in Baltimore, and a few streets over was another child his age growing up at the same time, also named Wes Moore. And so Wes Moore, the author, wrote a book about their childhood experiences and then the different paths that they went down. And so Wes Moore, was in the military, very high profile, entered politics. I mean, just, he has had and is having a very successful life. The other Wes Moore, perhaps due to life circumstances, is actually serving a life sentence for murder. And so the book really contrasts the different paths their lives took. And the power in it is knowing that someone has the same name as you and grew up a few streets over from you. And, his take on it is like, what happened in my life that made me go in this direction, and what happened in his life that made him go in that direction. And that could have easily been him, and he could have easily gone in my direction. So I know so many people who have read it, and I am super excited to read it.
And I think I'm going to read it. She may.
I'll give it to you, Jeanne, when I'm done.
You'll do that, please. It sounds really great.
It's a really good book. Yeah. I just feel like reading is one of those lost arts. We have so much coming at us all the time, through media and social media and so forth, that and I'm old school. Like, I will not buy a Kindle. I want to sit and hold the book.
Paper.
I want to put the book in my pocketbook and take it with me. I don't want to be, scrolling through something, because enough of what we do is related to electronics, and I am just not interested.
A lot of people across generations, like even I prefer print. I'm not a big e-reader. I do it when I have to, you know what I mean? Like when it's the only way to get something or the most convenient way to get something, but it feels less like I like being able to see how far in I am in the book, and the
Right.
little like bar on the bottom that's like you're 15% into the book. Not as satisfying for me as like putting that bookmark in and being like, I read this chunk, I got this chunk to go.
Right.
You can count the pages that are left to read.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the joys about being retired for me is that I can read until any time. So the other night it was about 2 a.m, and as you say, Tayla, I looked and I saw I had maybe 12 more pages to go, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm retired. I don't have school tomorrow. I don't have work tomorrow. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to finish this book, and I just could not do it. So I got up the next morning, and the first thing I did was make my cup of tea and finish that book. And you're right. When you can see how much more you have to go, you say, I'll give it 10 more minutes, and 10 becomes 15, becomes 20.
So, Jeanne, do you have anything on your to be read? Anything on your nightstand?
I don't. When I finish one, then I think about what I'm going to read from that.
Not a bad way. Sometimes I feel like there's this real emphasis, like how many books did you get through versus like really savoring and enjoying the books that you do get to.
I love to walk through the bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
I love to look at the covers of the books.
Yes.
Pick one up that's interesting, read a little bit of it, and then take it.
See, I like going to a bookstore, but then I take pictures of it and then I take it out from the library.
That's exactly what I do, Tayla. I take pictures. That's so funny you should say that, because I'm in, the bookstore, and I feel like I'm working incognito, like I'm taking pictures of these books covers, and I'm not sure, am I supposed to be doing this? Am I going to get in trouble? But I do the same exact thing. And then I have like this whole gallery of covers of books, and they become my like to read list.
But you can't put the book on your bookshelf.
No.
Well, I'm at max capacity there at this point. So unfortunately, I got to be really strategic with the books that I decide to bring into the collection.
I tell people all the time, I don't save anything. Like, I don't save anything, but I could so easily become a book hoarder. Oh, I could so easily become that.
Yes.
Yeah, I just was imagining like stacks, and then
Right.
you're just like behind them, like.
Right. Oh yeah, and I'll buy a book that I already have, and I'll go to put it away and go, oh my gosh, I already have that. So then I give it away. That's a little gift. And certainly libraries are like, they are just such amazing places to be. I was at the library on West Shore Road on Saturday, and I just walked around and I left and I came home and I said to my husband, it was so much fun to be at the library. Just walk around. There's just such a nice feel about it. And, like just seeing books and seeing families and individuals and so forth. So, if you're listening, get out there and get to your local library. It's a gem. Put that plug in.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Absolutely.
My reference is the Warwick Library on Sandy Lane.
Yes.
And over the years, it has become so much more than a library.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, looking at older people, isolation can be a real problem, but they offer music and it offers movies,
book clubs,
and all kinds of activities that draw people into the library. So, it's not the library of my generation when I was a young person. There you couldn't talk, you couldn't chew gum, but it's very different now, and does a lot to bring the community in.
We try. So thank you. Not to end on a shameless plug for libraries, please, again, check out the work that the Rhode Island Coalition for Elder Justice is doing.
I'm sorry, Tayla, but if I could just sort of jump in and just say quickly, there's no charge for any of our trainings or any of our services.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, there'll be as many links as we can shove in the show notes. So please check them out and find out what this coalition is working on. So thank you both for joining me, and thank you everyone for listening. If you would like to respond to our last chapter question or just reach out to the show, you can send us an email at overdoingitpod@gmail.com. And that's overdue like all the books at my house right now. I kid. Or you can find us at Instagram, also at overdoingitpod. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend and rate and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever else you get podcasts, because it helps people find the show and us to reach more Rhode Islanders. Overdoing It is proud to be a resident partner of the Rhode Island Center for the Book and is brought to you by library staff and community members all around the Ocean State. The project has been funded in part by the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services. Thank you again for listening, and this has been another episode of Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library Podcast. We're overdoing it, but you're doing just fine. I feel like I've just said interesting a lot. It's been great to be able